Welcome to the afternoon of the Methods Fair at Manchester. My name's Andy Lawrence, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a filmmaking for fieldwork method that we've developed over quite a long time here at Manchester and at various other places in the world. And in this presentation, I'm then going to hand over to Kelly here, who's just completed her PhD in education, and she's going to show you how she applied some of the methods that I'll talk about today in her own work. And so we'll just begin working our way through. So what is filmmaking for fieldwork? It's a cinematic method useful for both the exploration of academic research subjects and the representation of research findings. Okay? It uses ethnographic fieldwork techniques developed within the subject area of social anthropology to create a useful method for other discipline areas. And it is an epistemic practice that adopts empiricism through artistic methods to find new avenues of understanding for the social sciences. So the important thing there is it's both a method to explore your subject and a way of representing your subject. Okay? We're looking at filmmaking more than just taking pictures of things. We're looking at it as a way of knowing and understanding your subject area. Okay? It's a research method rather than just a way of expressing your research findings. Our team, you probably don't need to know all of this, but there's three of us that work on this project in various places in Switzerland, in Bern and Berlin in Germany, Manchester in the UK, and China and the US. Okay. Filmmaking for fieldwork developed from technical advances in cinematographic equipment that first appeared during the 1950s and 60s. In the UK, lightweight recording equipment found form in the observational method of documentary filmmaking developed by Colin Young and others at the National Film and Television School, placing constraints around the filmmaking method in an attempt to reach deeper into perceived realities. Filmmaking for fieldwork has developed the observational method into a deeply immersive form of exploration and expression by artistic means for the purposes of academic research. F4F restates the importance of constraints, but also encourages the bending of these where necessary to find a contextual and appropriate means in an attempt to express the inexpressible. This will become more clear as we go on, I hope. This is an example of one of our team, Martha Cecilia, working in Peru on her doctoral fieldwork using a camera and a microphone to work with her field subjects in Ayacucho in the Peruvian Andes. What does the F4F method offer? New ways of knowing your subject that are developed through each stage in the production of a film: concept, production, editing, screening, and distribution. There are ways of understanding and knowing your subject that can develop from each of the stages of making a film. Okay? We are not only interested in using images and sound to provide illustrative data for analysis or demonstration, but to develop methodologies around making films as a primary research endeavour and epistemological stance. Impact and further, with the sort of ways of understanding your subjects, a primary research method, it also has impact in sharing your research findings to broader audiences. How can filmmaking for fieldwork be considered as epistemic practice? This method is particularly useful when looking at human experience as it unfolds rather than an experience as a completed narrative. As such, this method is particularly suitable for exploring subjects close to the human experience, such as uncertainty, ambiguity, paradox, subjective confusion, the pre-reflective moments that are open to strategic interpretation. And this is useful because if we attempt to analyze emotional uncertainty with overtly rational tools, we remove the audience by conceptual means from an experience of how uncertainty and ambiguity feel. and therefore we limit a viewer's empathetic understanding of our research subjects, a big dilemma for the social sciences. Filmmaking happens at the speed of light and sound, recording what is happening in front of the lens and at the periphery of the microphone, captures the embodied reactions and interactions of the field worker and their subject. As such, it is a subjective and participatory exercise that requires a reflexive and ethical approach to fieldwork. Writing field notes is a slower, more conceptual and reflective process that translates experience as a narrative in note form. The benefit of a scholarly approach is that sentences can be recast when writing up, which suits the application and positioning of theory into the work. Filmmaking methods have been critiqued for a perceived inability to process theory. In filmmaking, sentences or shots are cast as they are being recorded. The editor can then select shots and alter their positioning in a film, but they cannot change the wording. This holds the field worker more accountable to the ethnographic origins of the work and helps to ensure that theory extends from the field work and is not imposed onto it. And now these are important issues that I'll elaborate on in a little while, but there's been a lot of talk of epistemic violence and the imposition of the theorist's ideas onto the fieldwork site. We claim that when you're using a camera in the field, you're held much more accountable to your ethnographic origins of the work. But you can still theorize through filmmaking. And I'll go on to demonstrate that later, that we locate the editing process as an analytical process where theory can develop. So how do we teach filmmaking for fieldwork? In our summer school and first semester courses here at the University of Manchester, cinematic practice is taught at an introductory level to develop foundational skills in three main areas. Okay, obvious ones: image, sound, and storytelling or editing. Okay? And there are three main areas of approach or methodology. So it's techniques and approaches we teach, a tack between them. Fieldwork relationships, very important when dealing with human beings. What and how to film, where to put the camera, where to start, when to turn it on, when to turn it off. Ethics and reflexivity, how to develop an ethical approach to our research and how to develop a strong reflexive stance so we understand the impact we ourselves are having on that work. Once the foundation courses have been completed through our first semester courses or our introductory filmmaking for fieldwork classes, we also have intermediate and advanced filmmaking for fieldwork, which deals with longer, more complex narratives, looking at learning how to explore the material you filmed and understand what's important and how to piece that together. Advanced editing techniques, distribution and dissemination, how to write about work and reflect on the methods used, raising production standards to increase the output potential of the work, and developing workflows for large-scale projects with a video element, and raising finance through crowdfunding, grants and commissions. Okay, so all the different avenues where you can take mainstream movie making practice and apply that to academic research that you might want to film. So recording images, the key thing of recording images, the emphasis that we place is on operating with manual functions, shot composition and positioning and handling of the equipment. This is to try and develop craft skills where you're very much in control of the way you're using the equipment. Okay, so you can choose how you engage with people and how you express things. So you haven't got the camera set to automatic where it's choosing how you artistically represent your subject. Recording sound, developing skills in the use of microphones and audio mixing with an emphasis on microphone placement and recording levels. So these are technical skills. This part of our teaching is, flicked ahead to there. This part is technical. Okay, we're talking about craft-based skills that combine with the approach skills that we teach as well. Storytelling. developing skills using professional video editing software such as the Adobe Premiere package used here at the University of Manchester, emphasising how sound and image come together in a structured way to tell a story that involves human emotion, strategic action, and their impact on others. These three words, emotion, strategy, and impact, are quite important to this method, and I'll elaborate a bit more on that in a minute. We encourage participants to re-engage with fieldwork experiences through the activity of editing and consider using this engagement as an analytical process. In this way, editors use primary data to explore the intersubjective spaces that lie at the threshold between perception and expression, which in turn help to motivate the ways in which they tell their stories. I'll elaborate on this in a minute. At the introductory level, the development of these craft skills are built around three filmmaking exercises that commonly constitute the main ingredients of most films: the process, the testimony, as opposed to the interview, and the event. Processes are what we do every day. They're from tying our shoelaces to eating food to any human process that occurs. There is a method we can apply to film that process. Events are commonly collections of processes that come together into something we might call a human event, social event. Okay? And what we say, whether it's formed by structured or semi-structured interviews, or whether it arises from the subjects through their own volition, through oral testimony, okay? Nearly everything in life that occurs to us is either a process, a testimony, or an event in some way. So we try and structure these craft-based skills through projects built around a method to film events, processes, and testimonies in whatever field you're in. This isn't just applying to anthropology. You can apply it to any social science, hard science, any area of research, I would like to think. So the moving picture makes itself I can never say this, I don't know why I put it in a presentation, but the moving picture makes itself sensuously and sensibly manifest as the expression of experience by experience. Okay, so experience is the frontier of a lot of social sciences. How do we show experience? How do we explore experience? And how do we show experience when we're using our own experience to show that experience? It all gets very complicated. So how do we film experience? The problem of where to place the recording equipment and what to do with it when dealing with broad concepts like confusion, memory, hope, despair, that come together to create experience. Experience is nothing on its own. It's an abstract concept that doesn't really mean anything. It's pieced together by other abstract concepts like confusion and hope and despair and memory. And these are the things that start to give texture to the way we feel about the world, the way we express ourselves in the world, and the way we perceive the world. Okay, filmmaking is a practical endeavor, and the maker needs to know what to film. In the F4F method, subjects direct the filmmaker's focus through their facial expressions, hand gestures, and productivity. In this method, we are the led. We're never the leaders. If you imagine this like a partnered dance, we're the led in that dance. We don't lead. It's our subjects and the actions, the things they do, the way they perform, the way they operate in the world that indicates where we put the camera and how we move the camera. In order to help students explore, we encourage them to think of human behavior as a triangle of action, the indices of which are emotion, expressed by the face, strategy, expressed by the hands, and impact, expressed through their productivity. In any situation that occurs to a human, you could locate one of these things. Now, we don't know if emotion influences strategy, or strategy influences emotion, or impact influences emotion or strategy. The process is overdetermined. Each thing is happening alongside the other, and it's a constant chain of reaction. Now, in this filmmaking approach, you can take a camera and you can point it at any one of these points in any process and move from one to the other, and you'll end up with close shots that you can cut together into a narrative. Okay? Films are made of wide, medium and close shots. What most filmmakers do at the beginning is they stand in the corner of the room with the camera locked off on a medium wide shot, hoping to catch everything that's happening. We're saying, no, we want you to move in with the camera and engage intersubjectively with your subjects and record the dimensions of experience, expressed through emotion, strategy and impact. A film progresses through a grammar of wide, medium and close shots with associated sound. At any point in the recording process, a filmmaker can film close-up action of the face, hands and productivity and explore the relation of these things to one another within a broad subject area. There is no order suggested in how these elements are recorded, other than that which is directed by the subject. We remain uncertain through the exploration process as to how emotion, strategy and impact might influence each other. The relations between people and people and things can then be further examined in the editing suite when the elements of a process or event are constructed into a narrative. I argue that in this way, filmmaking becomes an analytical process through which, if the researcher desires, theory can develop. This is one project that we're operating at the moment. I have this filmmaking and production company, All Rights Reversed, and Filmmaking for Fieldwork is an educational arm of that. And we're making a film at the moment called Horror in the Andes, looking into why horror films are so popular amongst filmmakers and the general public in the Peruvian Andes. Okay. Now, how are we doing for time? Because I've got a little film here that I was going to show you, but I just want to check. What? Sorry? Can't see a clock, no. Well, there's got to be one somewhere. Has anyone got the time? 10 to 2, so we've had 20 minutes already. So what I might do is come back to this film. This is an example of a film made by someone who adopted our methods here to explore a bakery in Scotland. So I might come back to this. It's a 10-minute film and we'll watch it at the end if we have time. Okay. This is a short film that we use these methods to make some films about the university's impact on the environment around. So this isn't so much a research film, but it's a way of using the methods. They were all students of this method who made this film for Jackie Carter, who's here today and organised this fair for you. So I'm going to show you this short clip.
Hi, my name is Vincent Barton. I live in Hume, Manchester. Currently work at Manchester University as a star technician. I was working as a gym instructor / personal trainer for a number of years. I was unemployed through redundancy. I guess the point where you feel like you're kind of stuck, which is not a nice feeling.
Several years ago, the university started to look at the impact that it was having in local communities in terms of employability and skills. We decided that we could make a significant impact in those communities by promoting ourselves to those communities as an employer of choice. And it seemed a natural step to establish a presence in the community, a resource where they could go along and do online job applications, access literacy and numeracy courses, as well as apply for vacancies. Within 2 years, we brought in 500 or 600 people.
Hi, Vin. All right, mate. Cheers.
Never even considered it as an option. I've worked at the university in the past, to be honest, which pretty sad when I think about it now to say, but I would have thought it was like above me.
The Works is part of the university's wider strategic vision to contribute to local communities. All the feedback I get from Works clients is that if you've been out of work and you find work, it changes your life. It gives you options and choices. It builds cohesion in communities and in families. You can improve the lives of your children.
Major impacts I can think of now is, okay, I've got children, I've got 2 daughters. There's always so many times you can go to the park. Now that I'm working, we can do better stuff. It's allowed me to move forward in my life again and have a better lifestyle than I did have before. I did start as a cleaner as well, and now I'm a star technician. Hopefully, maybe in a few months' time I can tell you that I'm something else. So that's how I keep moving up, how I keep progressing definitely as well.
Okay, oops, sorry. Okay, so the reason I showed you that is that we, the filmmakers who worked on that, were also looking into the experience of the subject's life, of how working in the University of Manchester contributed to his living, his way of living, how certain hours of working, methods of working affected his life. Now, that's the primary research element. So by spending time close to him, by hanging out with him, filming what's happening in his everyday life with his family, his kids, with the team at work, they're understanding in a much more deep way how his life is, how it feels. Then that film can also be packaged into this very short 2-minute clip that demonstrates the outcome of that. So this is a kind of long process that the university undertakes to try and develop outreach projects into the local area, and then it wants to assess how they're doing, and also the people involved, as you saw in the film there, it's their primary research to look at work and how people's work lives affect their home lives. And so a filmmaking method can be used to provide primary data. They might have filmed 5, 10, 20 hours of material, all of which is very useful in the primary research itself that might be written up into research papers, documents, impact papers that go to the government. But it can also be packaged in the end. You can take the elements of that, the wide, medium and close shots, and put it into a very neat little package that can go out and demonstrate what you've done in a very, very short time. Okay? So, where do we teach? We teach this mainly here in Manchester. That's been my base for the last 15, 20 years. But also in the Free University in Berlin, the University in Bern, Yunnan University in China. Sorry. Yeah. And then we teach through our own Filmmaking for Fieldwork summer school, which we run through Futureworks School of Media in Salford, if any of you know that, on Bridge Street. And I've got a few cards here you can take if anyone's interested in that. And we teach, when I've been based here, I've been based in the anthropology department, and we've been teaching people interested in anthropology. On our Filmmaking for Fieldwork summer school, we've taught people with backgrounds in politics, mathematics, all sorts of humanities subjects, town planning, midwifery, medicine. It's a really long list now where people have taken this approach to fieldwork, ethnography and filmmaking and applied it to their own subject areas. Here at the University of Manchester, we've worked with a number of people after they've taken these courses, one of which is Dr. Eleanor Barabant-Sever. So if any of you are interested in this method, Kelly's going to present her work now, and then there's Eleanor in the politics department, who's a postdoctoral, who's a senior lecturer now, and she used the method to explore the experiences of 2 Chinese boys growing up in Manchester. And that's all documented on our website. So if you're interested in seeing how she applied that, you can look at that there. And if anyone's interested, email me and we'll send you a link of the film to the film, which is here. Okay, now I want to hand you over to the far more exciting part of this presentation, which is with Kelly Pickard-Smith.
So it's maths, Jim, but not as we know it. My PhD research was around the use of maths in everyday practice and common perceptions or misconceptions around the use of mathematics and what mathematicians are like. I'm not a mathematician myself. I've spent 10 years in vocational education. I approached this research from a position of equity and access to employment and jobs for students who had or were considered to have a lower ability in mathematics. And funnily enough, my original research was going to be with Steve at the Works, and my pilot was with their building attendants and their maths use. But it became clear to me that I needed to access parts of their experience, which was very difficult to do with traditional research. So I chose drama, which you haven't seen in the film so far, and filmmaking as research methods to capture memory and experiences of mathematics. So that was my PhD film. And the common stories around maths, we all know, we've heard them say it in the film, that it's to do with you're a geek, you're some kind of genius. And it was looking at where these stories come from, and if lower ability mathematicians, people who use maths, consider themselves non-mathematical, how do then people who are considered to be proficient mathematicians, so PhD and onwards, consider themselves to be mathematical? And everybody in that film actually studied mathematics at postgraduate level. So even when you see some of them talking about that they wouldn't do Sudoku, for example, these are people who are operating at quite high levels of mathematics. And it started from, that's me, 1992, with my lovely bubble perm and my tracksuit. And at school, naff, it was really fashionable at the time. I was considered as somebody who couldn't do maths. I came from a council estate. It was one of the largest in Europe. And it really sort of set me off on a road of not being where I wanted to be, because I wanted to be an astrophysicist, and then just a range of really random jobs afterwards because I didn't get my maths at school, because they entered us all for the intermediate paper. So when I came, oh, my slide's gone a bit weird. So when I came to researching maths, my perspective, the theory around why I ended up using film is because mathematical performance, you being proficient in mathematics, it's usually considered the way that you actually perform maths on a test paper, but not the experiences which Andy was talking about. What is it like in your everyday life? What is your everyday experience of using mathematics? So this is this idea that it's performed in practice, and it's also very much the stories told about being mathematical have an influence on how you then go on and perform in those tests. So it's performance as a research method to investigate mathematical performance. Why film? To explore their actuality. It's not necessarily a reality, because I was trying to mine people's memories and past experiences. And that was very difficult for them. In the second section of the film, where they start to use the drama, the research participants or the subjects in the film, you can see their struggle with how they think about what their past self used to be like. So when Andy was talking about the paradox and the accessing people's memories and their feelings, you very, very much see through the camera the tension and their emotional struggle with relating back to how they felt in a school classroom, to having to hide being mathematical, and also against being storied now in the present time. So you can see the discussion, the dialogue between people, and the tension between some very forceful characters who were in the film, who try and impose their ideas of what it means to be mathematical on others, and then how those people then try and cope with that. So it's very good for the narratives of imagination, so looking into past memory, and also how they engage with each other as people, as objects, as cultural mediators of human activity. And what that means is these people are embodied, and they also pass on cultural ideas to each other of what they think mathematics is. The memory in the film served very well to access memory, because you can actually be quite abstract in film. So even though this was using filmmaking for fieldwork and observational methods, the observation was an observation of the drama. So they were free to use the drama in any way that they wanted to be able to convey these memories. And you actually see them conveying memories that are without words. And I couldn't have done that in an everyday usual piece of research. So further on in the film, you see Claire, and she's used the trick of perspective in front of the camera to make the board look huge while she's very small, because in her mind, her memory of doing mathematics at school is she's a tiny, tiny girl, and the board is blown up out of perspective, and it's a very grey room, and the teacher is grey and she's grey, and she hears the imagined voices of her classmates in her mind. And all of this film was able to convey by trickery of playing with perspective, playing with voices off camera. So it was very, very useful in that respect to be able to portray Claire's experience, her emotional experience and her memory in a way that was actually more real for her than as if she had just told me in an interview. There isn't much visual anthropology in mathematics, actually. When I was doing my literature review, I actually found that the majority of films made about mathematicians and about mathematics are usually commissioned via the BBC. That's not to say they're not anthropological films, but they're usually made from the perspective of an anthropological or observational filmmaker, and not necessarily from the perspective of a mathematician or a mathematics researcher who then goes on to do filmmaking. So the two examples at the top, Twice Five plus The Wings of a Bird and Hard Problems, they're both BBC commissioned films. The bottom film, Colours of Math, is actually the only film I could find made by a mathematician. So when it comes to using film in your research methods, I think it's really important for you to think about, is it something that you could do? Is it something that would develop your field? Because in my field, actually, mathematics anxiety is very, very heavily researched. So if I'm to find a niche and to explore something new about mathematics, about my own field, what could I do? Where is the gap? And the gap here was exploring mathematics from the perspective of mathematicians. So that was the process. So we used the observations. I looked at, the facial expressions, the hand movement. We had testimonies there that you saw at the beginning. The testimony was very different to interview in that I didn't lead them with questions. They were just given a broad idea of, speak to me about your experiences with maths and what do you think a mathematician is. An interview sort of invites an answer and a response, whereas in the testimony they were free to explore their own stories. And then we saw the example. As a process of analysis in my thesis, I have not written any analysis chapters. I actually borrowed very heavily from anthropology and their description of how they set up their thesis, which hasn't been used in education before. And I argued, as Andy has discussed, that film is inherently an analytical process. So I have a huge monster methodology that argues that point, that film is an aesthetic way of knowing. It's knowing through beauty, and it shows aesthetic knowing in the sense of experience. And you're co-constructing the story. When it comes to do it in practice, the log and transcribe is where you'll get to know your data, and you'll do that with any sort of qualitative research. But the beauty of it with film is that you can get to know your data and what your narrative might be like, and you can do a paper edit before you even start to edit on paper. But you need to bear that in mind in your timescales because it's quite a lengthy process. You probably can't see that top picture very well. In the field, don't take it lightly that you're going to just go off and you're going to grab a camera and you're going to go out and do some research. Filmmaking is really difficult. And I don't mean difficult in the technical side of it. I mean in the physical side, which is something that I hadn't really anticipated as a filmmaker. Filmmaking for a long duration of time requires really intense concentration, and for you to keep that up through looking through the lens leads to slippages, it leads to you dropping the camera down out of shot, and there's camera shake and sound issues. I actually grew huge muscles, I lost a stone in weight, but also your identity as a filmmaker. I found it was really difficult sometimes to film in my own clothes, and people would often say, what are you doing here? And I couldn't get access. So I had to think of my identity also as a filmmaker, and borrowed a t-shirt from the university, which gave me a bit of credence, and people were, oh right, so you're a filmmaker and you're professional, you're not just some person with a camera. So it's not just the theory side, it's not just the method side, it's how are you actually going to do it in the field. And at the start I did have help because the equipment's very heavy and cumbersome, until towards the end when I became more proficient in moving around. So those are all sort of practical aspects you need to bear in mind. And also finally, research impact. Research impact is huge now. Your work that you're going to do is not just going to be bound up in a PhD, you need to get it out there to a wider public. And I didn't want mine to just go into a journal to be read by a few people. So I've distributed mine via Vimeo, online, Twitter, Facebook, and in the short space of time that it's been out there, it's engaged over 300 people. So I found film is a very useful way of getting your research out to a broader range than just necessarily academics in a book. And finally, I'll just end on that. Western civilization is more dependent than ever on visual culture as a mode of discourse and a means of developing a social and cultural identity. So that was one of the reasons it was really important for my work in mathematical identity, that it's actually keying into the way we live now. It's not just this new shiny method. This is something that we're living with on a daily basis, so it should be adopted in research. Thank you.